want to welcome everybody and to our monthly webinar series. We try to cover lots of different topics, and this seems to be a pretty popular one. We had almost 80 people register, and not everyone always gets on just because they know there's going to be recording, but we have 35 people live right now, which is pretty impressive. This is going to be really fun. And again, I'm Christine Buckley with the Brain Aneurysm Foundation. Lynn Nuttall's on from the foundation, and our guest of honor is brain aneurysm survivor and attorney Steve Triffletti. So thank you, Steve, for being with us.
Thank you, Christine.
All right, so we're going to get right off. We've got a lot of info to cover. So first question to Steve, please share your story of how your brain aneurysm was found and what your initial reaction was to hearing the term brain aneurysm.
So first of all, thank you, everyone, for having me here this evening. I'm delighted to be a part of this, delighted to be a part of the Brain Aneurysm Foundation. About 8 years at this point, 8 years ago, I was traveling on Route 3 South at what was the old Exit 5. And as I was getting off the ramp, I was rear-ended by another vehicle. And so I get out, and we exchanged information, and I was right in front of the police station. So we went over to the police station and exchanged information. And then I went to my office, which was right there. Even though I had some discomfort, I thought, well, I'll go to the ER a little bit later. And so that's what I did do. I went to the ER that night because I recommend to all my clients, we do personal injury law along with other things. And I thought to myself, oh, that poor lady, she hit me and rear-ended, and I happen to be a lawyer that does personal injury. But in any event, I went to the hospital. I was there much of the evening, Beth Israel Deaconess in Plymouth. And about midnight, the doctor came in and said, you know, you're okay from the accident, but we discovered that you need to see a neurosurgeon. You have a brain aneurysm. And so my first reaction to that was, well, okay, I'm going to do what the doctor tells me, because my brother is a primary care physician. My wife is a clinician. My niece is an ER nurse. And what I've learned over the years from all of them is there's a lot I don't know. And so I'm going to follow the professional medical advice. And so that's what I did.
Thanks, Steve. So do you think that your experience as an attorney gave you an advantage in deciding to seek care for yourself by being checked out at the emergency room after the accident?
I do, in part because many of my clients who are in car accidents often don't go to the ER. We always recommend, even if you feel good, go to the ER. And so in my case, I didn't really feel that bad. I had some tingling and some discomfort, but I went to my office. I worked all afternoon. It wasn't until probably dinner time. I skipped dinner, and probably about 7 o'clock, I got to the ER after I left the office. So that, I wasn't following all of my regular advice, because I would tell people, go right away. But because I tell people to do that, I say, well, I better follow my own advice. Even though I feel okay, I'm going to go, because I'm aware that when you're in a car accident, that you may feel okay that day, the adrenaline may be going, but then several days later, you may have some pain and discomfort. So certainly my experience as an attorney certainly helped me in that.
Great. And knowing that brain aneurysms are often found incidentally like yours, what would your advice be to others in similar scenarios, whether it be a car accident or fall or other injury, in terms of seeking medical attention?
Well, certainly when people have any type of accident, we say that to all of our clients, whether it's a fall down or a car accident or some other type of injury, always get checked out. Because even if you don't want to bring a claim, in my case against the other driver, it's still important to early on have the test, so that later, if something does arise, you compare the tests to what symptoms you're experiencing later. And obviously, in my case, I was very fortunate because my aneurysm was caught before it ruptured.
Thank you. And because I know a bit about your journey, I remember you encountered some issues with insurance regarding a medication you needed before surgery. Can you share this with us? And again, comment on the importance of being your own best health advocate.
Yes, so that's a good question. So I went up to Beth Israel and I was seen by my neurosurgeon up there, Chris, and I saw him probably within the week after the accident. And uh, I was scheduled for surgery about a month after the accident. I was very fortunate. But in the meantime, they told me, well, go on some Brilinta. I think it was a blood thinning. And so I went to the pharmacy and they said, oh no, Blue Cross is denying it. And I said, what? And they said, yeah, they're denying it. It's not covered. So you're going to have to pay for it, which I could have paid for it, but I didn't want to pay for it. I thought that isn't fair. And when I talked to them, I went directly to Blue Cross and I filed an appeal. There's an appeal process. And they said, oh, well, we don't approve Brilinta except for transplants. And I said to them, well, I'm not having a transplant, but I'm having brain surgery, and you are going to approve it. And to make a long story short, they did approve it. And I thought to myself, how unfortunate for many people that may not have the skills that I have to argue with these places on an appeal, because so often, in a sense, people, the companies like the insurer will take advantage. And I found that as recently as the past couple of weeks. I am currently on vacation and I needed to get a vacation override on a topical gel that I have. But because it's a controlled substance, I had to go through hoops. I had to go first get approval from Blue Cross. Then they told me I had to get approval from the pharmacy. Then I had to get approval from my provider. My provider kept doing things like sending over a fax. The pharmacy said, that's not okay. The nurse practitioner called. They said, no, that's okay. They said, we got to talk to the doctor. The doctor's office said, the doctor never calls. And finally, this started on a Monday. I was leaving on a Friday. And finally, on Thursday, the doctor called me and said, I don't understand this. I happen to know him. And he said, but I did call. But the point is that I really had to go through the hoops just to get a simple topical medication because I was going to run out because of the length of time that I was going to be away. And I thought again to myself, how unfortunate for people. But that's why the Brain Aneurysm Foundation is so good, because there's a support network of people who can help those that are struggling when they get these curveballs. I mean, it's bad enough to be told you got to see a neurosurgeon and you got a brain aneurysm. And then all of a sudden, to have everybody along the way give you a hard time, from the insurer to the pharmacy. I mean, it just goes on and on. So, that was good. I was also fortunate uh, in that I have other medical people close to me and I could bounce ideas off. And whether to have the surgery was a big decision for me, because for those of you that know, I was like right on the edge, like point one, and I was told that, if it were below point one, you probably wouldn't do it, and point one to point two, you would, and over point two, definitely. And I talked to my brother, the primary care physician, and he said he wouldn't do it. And so I thought to myself, oh, here he is, primary care doctor, and he doesn't think that it's severe enough. But and I was told at the time, all of the possible outcomes. You could have a stroke, you could die from the surgery. But I asked my neurosurgeon, who's the expert, because that's how I've lived my life, and I said, "What would you do if you were you?" And he said, "I'd have the surgery," and that was good enough for me. So I disregarded my brother, the primary care physician, and I went with the stranger, but the expert, who told me, and I'm glad I did, because uh, it was successful, and I was very fortunate. I also had challenges going through it. Initially, they couldn't even get the IV in. I've always been a hard stick, and I think after 4 tries and 3 different nurses, they finally got it in. So for all of you watching this, there are challenges all along the way, and that's why we're so fortunate to have the Brain Aneurysm Foundation, because the foundation provides support and comfort. And when I finally got out of the surgery, that was one of the first things I saw was written materials from the foundation to help me navigate, my life post-surgery.
Thanks, Steve. So I think it's definitely clear that being an attorney has given you training and confidence not all of us have. And I'm sure, though, the many people you've represented and you understand people are uncomfortable questioning authority figures, including medical professionals. Can you give us some tips to help people feel more at ease and empowered to ask the questions they need for their health and not feel uncomfortable about doing so?
Yeah, that's good. I think it's true in anything in life. It's always good to do research or gather information uh, and ask as many questions as you can. And then in the end, you have to make what you believe to be the right decision. So, as you heard in my case, I went to a doctor, my brother, and a family member for support. And yet, in the end, I made the decision and I rejected his particular uh, advice because I decided that this is way out of my league. I'm dealing with brain surgery and I've got a neurosurgeon. He's well respected. He's had good medical outcomes. And I also had to think about how did I want to live the rest of my life. I mean, we know people that they get a cancer diagnosis, and some people say, I'm not going to have the treatment. I'm just going to live out whatever is the possible time I have left. Uh, I'm probably the type of person that, and my wife would say to me, off to the kids, she'll say, if I get to a point when I'm older where, I'm kind of not with it, shoot me. Uh, but seriously, and I say to everybody, I'm going to do everything I can because I know what, uh, my family, my friends, my clients, they can all benefit even if I'm not all there. If I have some physical limitations, if I were in a wheelchair, I'd still want to keep going because I know that, particularly children and grandchildren, they, to this day, they benefit from the wisdom of our years. And so, for me, it was very important to do whatever I could. I didn't want to be a ticking time bomb. I didn't want to just say, okay, fine, I don't have to do it. I'm on this statistical scale that may or may not rupture. That just wasn't something that I thought was appropriate for me. And for those of you that are tuning in, if you're not all survivors, I'll tell you, post surgery, it was very, very painful for a while. But, and I probably went back to work sooner than I should have, but that's one of the ways in which I dealt with it. I dealt with, work through my pain through my work. And it was very helpful to me because it distracted me. I wasn't sitting around all day moping about thinking, poor me, how terrible. And I was actually, we were told by some people, well, there's a lot of things that could happen after. You could be depressed or you could be nervous or whatever. And I was just joyful because here I was fortunate enough to have been diagnosed and then to have surgery that was successful. And my result was they put a titanium stent in my left vertebral artery and it remodeled the artery and it later caused the artery to go away. So I feel very fortunate about that. And I'm grateful to everybody at Beth Israel, including Christine, your sister, who was very compassionate.
She's the compassionate one. Thank you, Steve. That's the nurse in her, But you just to comment on that, I mean, from people we hear from reaching out to the foundation all the time about being your own best advocate. I mean, I've learned just through the years here. I mean, having a diagnosis of a brain aneurysm is serious. It's scary. And all I can tell people all the time is ask whatever question you want to your healthcare provider. That's what they're there for. You're having something serious done and you are welcome to ask whatever it is. And I know it's just hard for people. You think the doctor's short on time. He told me this, I can't ask, but I can't stress enough pre-diagnosis or when you are just finding out pre-surgery and in recovery, if you have questions, you need to ask them. I had someone that I had worked with as a consultant here that called me Saturday. His uncle in Florida had a brain aneurysm. He said, this is one of the things I've been most afraid about since I met you in the organization, is knowing someone that had it. So he was reaching out, asking me what should his aunt ask and what to expect, even though he knew a lot in that moment, like you're so panicked. So I just advised him again, tell your aunt, ask whatever she wants, find out his prognosis, what's the grade of the hemorrhage, and always encourage people when they're in that facility setting, where treatment's happening, to take notes. If you have a family member who someone is there being your main caretaker, to write everything down, to have a journal date. They said this, they got this drug at this point in time. But it's just so scary. And I know the treating practitioners don't mean to, not overload with information or just be short and curt, but for them, they're doing something they do over and over again. But for you, it's happening this one time. So I'm just can't stress enough to ask the questions that you need to ask, because we have one trip here in this life. And like Steve said, having kids and grandkids and wisdom. And for him, he's here and he can contribute to his family and society. And I always say to people when we go to Capitol Hill, which we're going March 20th, that's the most important thing. We want to keep families and communities together. And Steve, again, it's kind of, comical that he was in a rear-ended as an attorney, but that's how he found his brain aneurysm. So
Chris, I can tell you, I actually later called up the woman who hit me and damaged my car, and I thanked her. And of course, she must have thought I was crazy, because what's this guy doing? She damaged my car. She caused me to be in an accident, and I was thankful. But I was grateful that because of the accident, that I had the good result. I also, as many of us do, shared my diagnosis with my family. And interestingly enough, I was told, my family of origin, my children. So I have a brother who was tested, his three children, and my three children. They were all okay, but I went beyond that group and I went to my cousins, because I thought, well, it's possible. And sure enough, I have a cousin in Dallas, and she calls me her guardian angel because she was diagnosed with two brain aneurysms, and she only went and got checked out after I told her that I was diagnosed, and she's had successful surgery. So it's very important, certainly with your family, to have them all checked out. And actually, my niece, who's the nurse, was denied coverage. And so, again, I got involved and I gave her a copy of my medical records so that she could give that to the insurer and say, my uncle has this and I need to be tested. And then she was tested. So, again, another, here she is, a healthcare professional being told no. And fortunately, we knew enough to say, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. This is consistent with acceptable medical practice. And beyond privately going with your family, I support going publicly. And a lot of people don't want to do that. I know that a lot of professionals over the years have said they don't want to because they feel it'll affect their work. And I did have a few clients say to me, ooh, do I need to get another lawyer now? Or, as if I was going to be, impaired or a leper. And I said, no, I'm feeling perfectly fine. I've had a successful result. And so for me, going public has actually been very rewarding, because in sharing my story, in sharing information about the Brain Aneurysm Foundation, about symptoms, about what to do, uh, I know that the foundation and certainly and I have helped many, many people, because given the statistics of how many people have an aneurysm, you all know somebody that has been touched by it. You may They may not have told you because if you haven't shared your story, then you may not be aware. But I can tell you from the number of people who have come up to me and told me and thanked me, uh, and in my case, because I'm fortunate enough to over the years have been a public figure, an elected official in my town. Uh, I've spoken about it uh, at town meeting when I'm the town moderator. I've done TV locally and radio and print media. And so by coming public with it and not really being reluctant or afraid to do it, it's actually had probably the opposite result. Instead of adversely affecting me, I think it's probably helped in terms of how people receive me. And I'm kind of now, when somebody knows of somebody who has suffered a brain aneurysm or has a diagnosis in my community, I'm kind of the go-to person because I have been so public about it. Not that there aren't plenty of other people in Plymouth, for example, that have suffered, because there are many, and I know quite a few of them. But being that I've publicly spoken about it, it's caused many people to reach out to me from time to time.
Yeah, and so kind of in the wrap-up question I had, you touched upon some of it, but he's been an amazing advocate for awareness and education since his aneurysm. And just talk a little bit more about the annual event that you have and also the different civic groups that you speak at, because there's others on here. There's people here from all over the country that are on this webinar. So to give them ideas of how they too can share and just how that has been meaningful for you to give back and the impact it has had.
So I always say to people, go to your strengths and go to that with which you're comfortable. And so for me, I'm a member of Rotary. So I spoke at many Rotary groups in the state of Massachusetts. But I also locally spoke to other service clubs like Kiwanis, like Lions, B&I chapters, the Chamber of Commerce. Uh, Really, anytime when I had the opportunity to share my story, because I knew that my story was compelling and something that would be of interest to people to hear. And so I wanted to share it. And whenever there was the opportunity, there were other social or civic groups that Christine and I went to. And I've also volunteered to be a speaker even for the foundation. And so there was one time when Christine was unavailable, and I actually went out across the country to California to accept for the foundation a significant donation from a Rotary club. It was a natural fit, being that I'm a past president of a Rotary, but certainly speaking before as many groups. Oh, my church. I spoke at my church, and people came up to me after I spoke during during a worship service. And so I would say to everybody watching, if you have a story to tell, figure out what it is you do, and where would somebody like to hear this story, because it's a great gift, really, that you can give back. And that's what I really wanted to do. After I had the surgery, I said, what can I do to give back, to show my appreciation to the wonderful people at Beth Israel Hospital and the Brain Aneurysm Foundation. So, I'm not good at, building things and carpentry or, doing something. And, some people like to do golf tournaments, and I don't play golf. I've given up on that. So I had to figure out, well, what could I do? So, being that I'm a member of the business community as well in my community, because I have a local law firm, I know that it's often popular to have after hours. Our Chamber of Commerce has an after hours every month. And so I modeled an event based on what I already knew to be something that would appeal to people. And that was to gather people together at a local, in my case, restaurant, from maybe 5 in the afternoon to 7, just a couple of hours. And I got a lot of donations from various businesses and people. And we did a silent auction and we did raffle, and it was a cash bar. So, the restaurants usually will provide some food. And each year, we've been doing this, except for 1 year during COVID, and it's been highly successful insofar as, it may not be the biggest fundraiser that the foundation has, but it does raise money that's helpful. And certainly over the years, the total amount is growing. Uh, but it's also not just about raising money, it's raising awareness and education. And so we happen to plan our event. We call it a brain aneurysm after hours, awareness after hours. And we do it in September, Brain Aneurysm Awareness Month. I usually do it in the beginning of the month because I do it on usually the Wednesday and Thursday right after Labor Day, because it's kind of like everybody's back in town, getting ready to go back to school. And so it's kind of going back to the community, going back to after hours. And so it's been well received, highly successful. And it's also not only awareness education, but it's also been great networking with survivors. So many survivors attend, they look forward to it. And I try to highlight the survivors that attend. I usually have them, help me give out the door prizes or the raffle prizes. We've been fortunate to have a music entertainment. So, the survivors even, in various conditions of recovery, get up and dance and sing. And so it's really been a very fun, feel good event, which, along with raising money and awareness and education, people can also have a good time. And it's informal. So it's not like you're, even tonight, where you're sitting and you're listening to me as a talking head, but rather, it's really interactive so that people can go around, and we highlight Christine and her staff so that people can ask questions. I've had people say, "Oh, I want to get more information." I say, "Go talk to the foundation people," or people really want to talk to a family member that may have lost somebody, or someone who may be a survivor. They want to have that physical, direct, in-person contact, and this event provides all of that.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate all that information that you shared. Now, there were some questions people did submit. Again, Steve is not here as a disability attorney or anything like that. He's just sharing his experience and lending, his professional background to being able to help people advocate a little bit and maybe send people in different directions. So there are a couple common themes, and maybe you could recommend what people should do. How do you advocate for disability accommodations at work? What if your medical bills are denied by insurance? And we'll start with those two actually for right now.
All right, well, the latter one, on medical bills, as I said, my experience has been primarily with Blue Cross, my insurer, and there's an appeal process. And so you initially file an appeal, then they make a decision. If you don't like the decision, you can appeal again. So, I wouldn't give up, and I would file those appeals with the insurer, because many times, once they start getting some pushback, then they relent and they give in. And so that was it. And the other question had to do with disability, Christine.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things like for work. So sometimes if someone goes back to work, they may need modifications. And then in other circumstances, particularly if someone's ruptured, sometimes they get let go from work because their employer doesn't think that they're keeping up to like the pace they were before. So what would the recourse be if there's just issues with employment and getting certain accommodations?
So one thing is, you could talk to a local attorney. Certainly there are attorneys that specialize in employment law. But beyond that, if you didn't want to go that route, and I can't speak for other states, but for example, in Massachusetts, we have the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, And so someone can go without an attorney and file a claim. And I assume there are comparable agencies in other states. So definitely uh, move forward either with professional support or on your own with an appropriate local, state, or federal agency. I mean, beyond that, there may be some uh, attorney general offices in states. We have the Consumer Protection Division of the Attorney General's office. And so in our state, there's a consumer protection statute, which is unfair and deceptive acts and practices against the consumer. That would be in the case of the insurer not paying a bill, or maybe even somebody else not providing you with certain adjustments that should occur. And in Massachusetts, there's a specific law related to insurance companies under the Consumer Protection Statute, but there's a Consumer Protection Division, and most states would have that. So, there's a number of possibilities. We call that administrative law remedies as distinguished from court remedies. So, Attorney General's office, a discrimination office, and there's got to be one probably in most states because there's availability at the federal level. Even in your own town or community. I mean, in my community, there is a disabilities commission. And so, go to the local people, go to their office, meet with them. We have a person in our town, and a town official, who is authorized and has responsibility of making sure that people with disabilities uh, receive the type of uh, modifications to which they're entitled. And so I know even when I schedule a meeting, I have to, if it's going to be a remote and hybrid, I need to check with the local disabilities person. So, there's a lot of support out there, but you have to go and figure out what applies to your town or county or state.
Okay, that's great. And a little bit of a different question is, can you recommend for people when they're going on their follow-up visit with their neurosurgeon, whether, post clip or coil, what do you think it's important to ask?
I'm not a medical person, so, but what I ask, I mean,
Well, yeah, like what concerned you after treatment and you were going back in, and did you
sure.
have certain
I
questions
wanted to
you
know,
wanted?
obviously, how was I doing? Were they happy with the results? And also, what about follow-ups? When should I come back again? What should I do going forward? And also understanding the symptoms, because I had a symptom, but I didn't know it. So I had some discomfort in my head, in the area where my left vertebral artery is located, but I ignored it. And I ignored it because I work out at the gym. I have a trainer because I'm not good at working out at the gym, and I don't always do the exercises properly, which is why I have somebody telling me what to do and do it properly. So I thought, oh, I'm just using machine wrong, and I've got a little strain. It's like sometimes if you do too many spin classes in a row, your legs hurt. So in my case, my head hurt. I thought, oh well, I'm using a machine. I'm lifting things. That must be it. So I ignored it, and I would say for people now, make sure you understand all the symptoms, because if there's a recurrence, you're going to want to catch it right away, before it gets ruptured.
Excellent. I think those are the most encapsulating questions related to this topic that people have. Others that are more specific to aneurysms and screenings, we can look at and get back to you via email. But again, Steve has been an amazing advocate about raising awareness and providing education everywhere he goes. And I certainly know everyone's different, the comfort level of public speaking. But I'll tell you, if you have the opportunity to advocate for the disease and what you've been through and sharing your story, it will make an impact and it will touch people. I haven't seen a case of where someone hasn't been interviewed, or again, the different opportunities that Steve has had to speak, that it comes back to him. Like he said, if someone in his community knows someone that has an aneurysm, they're going to Steve for a resource and references and things like that. So, you know, we're talking about being your own best advocate for your health. And again, ask away because it's important for you and you need to do it. But on the flip side, after the fact, advocating for this disease, you know, for better awareness and education is honestly, it's critical. And Steve has been, you know, stellar at that. So
And
thank
Chris,
you.
I would say everybody has something they could do. You know, in my case, I said, I'm a public speaker, so I went to do that. I volunteered with your organization to be available. But, you know, there were so many people affected. One of our honorees one year was a 3-year-old in our community that had a brain aneurysm and died from it and didn't survive. Think about all the people who are participating that might be a parent or a grandparent. I mean, you have a skill set just as having been a parent and a grandparent to reach out and comfort and talk to other families that are touched by a brain aneurysm if there's a young child. One of our other honorees was a guard in the local house of correction, and he was 25 years old. And when we wanted to honor him at our event, because we like to honor somebody each year, we spoke to his mother and stepfather and met with them in advance. And then later they came and they were very, how shall I say it, comforted. It was very upsetting to them. There were tears, but I know that they were thrilled not only to be honored, but to come up and again have people aware of their son and his story and how wonderful he was, even though he didn't survive. So I would just let you know that there's so much that you can do having been touched by this and then sharing with other people. And as I often say to people when they talk about going to a funeral or a wake, like, oh, I don't know what to say, what do? My view would be it doesn't really matter what you say. It's that you're going to be there, that you care, and that you're going to listen. And so for all of us that have gone through this, it's special when other people who've been affected and may not have the same outcome are able to still talk to us and know that, you know, we're going to do everything we can to try to raise awareness, raise money, improve diagnosis and treatment so that what happened maybe to one family may not happen to others in the family. I mean, I guess selfishly, I would say I want to do whatever I can because I have children and grandchildren, and someday if they're touched by this, I want to do everything I can to improve the medical care so that maybe when it happens to them, they'll have even a better result than I had.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you, Steve, again, so much, particularly on vacation. When I talked to Steve about this, asking him for very little notice, I'm like, we can put you to March, but he said, nope, he'd be happy to do it. So I really appreciate all you have done and that all you're willing to continue to do, but particularly for taking the time today and sharing again. So big thank you. Thank you for everyone for participating, for your support of the foundation. And again, you know, advocate for yourselves and advocate for the disease. And again, Steve, thanks so much. Good night to all.